Before we jump into today's episode, quick disclaimer that this podcast isn't therapy. It's educational, not individualized advice. Everyone's brain and story are different, so if you're struggling, reach out to a licensed pro who can support you.
We talk about the stuff no one dares. ADHD, sex, and the science that cares. Real talk, raw truth, and the stories that heal. Welcome to ADHD Reality with Dr. B.
All right, so I have to be honest with you. I have been waiting to record this episode for a long time, like an embarrassingly long time, because there is this topic of GLP-1s. Everyone seems to be a scientist, a pharmacologist online, a lot of misinformation out there, fear mongering. And I've done the research myself. I've looked at the articles and I've had people tell me in my own personal life, like, listen, you're hurting yourself, you're going to gain all the weight back, all the shit, right? And so having you here today is an honor and also really important for me and so many of my clients because we as ADHDers tend to have our own variety of fun shit with food. We see it in the research all the time that there is a relationship with eating disorders and ADHD, impulsivity, food noise, all the things. So having you here today is really helpful because I'm a science nerd and I love your science nerd side and fighting the good fight of misinformation. So, welcome, Dr. Spencer Nadolsky. You are an obesity medicine specialist, and I would love you to introduce yourself. And then I would love to jump in with all of my nerdy fucking questions that I have for you today.
Perfect. My elevator pitch to people, it's not a pitch, it's really quick intro is grew up in an athletically, academically minded family, wanted to use exercise and nutrition science to get good at sports, went to college, played football and wrestled, then wanted to use just a fraction of that obsession with getting better at sports to help people. We didn't have these medicines back then. We had some there. We can talk about some of the older drugs, but so I was, really grounded in lifestyle, behavior medicine to get people healthier and get them going from zero to just doing something instead of my obsession with exercise and nutrition. Just a slight edge to the right for the needle, and that actually has the most improvement versus incrementally improving health with my obsession. So went to med school, then residency. I did family medicine, which is the broadest, and then specialized into obesity medicine and something called lipidology, like the study of lipids and cholesterol and that type of thing. Really cynical of how the healthcare system is. So got into the startup world, digital health startup world, and trying to deliver healthcare in innovative, different ways because I cannot stand the current healthcare system. So that's where I am now. I have my own online 50-state telemedicine practice and help thousands of patients with my dietitians and other doctors and that sort of thing. But with what we're going to discuss today.
That's fucking awesome. Kicking ass and taking names. I like it.
Trying.
Yeah, no, it's good. I'm kind of right there with you, but in the mental health realm. So, I get it. So before then we get into all, I guess, the controversy and the noise around this topic, can you just kind of walk us through what GLP-1s are, right? Like, where did this come from? What does it do in the body naturally? How do we get from this being, I guess, a diabetes drug to now one of the most talked about medicines in modern medicine?
Yeah. So GLP-1 stands for glucagon-like peptide 1, natural hormone released from our intestines after we eat. It was found because it's called the incretin effect. They injected glucose into our veins versus made people drink it back in the 60s, way long ago. And, I would think that if you injected glucose straight into the veins, it would get to your pancreas quicker. That's what releases insulin, and that's the hormone that helps get your sugars into your cells, like your muscle or your fat or other tissues. Well, they found out that the insulin was overall higher when they ingested it. So they're like, oh, there's something about the intestines secreting a hormone. I don't know. So they called it the incretin effect. They didn't know specifically what were the actual incretin hormones, but they knew that they were out there. There was something about ingesting it versus injecting it. And then it wasn't until like the 80s or later where they started figuring out these specific incretins, one of them being GLP-1. So that was like in the later 80s that they figured it out. The issue is natural GLP-1 is broken down in our body by our own enzyme within a minute or two. So, to have the effect, they'd have to infuse human GLP-1 like a bag. At the hospital, you see it getting an infusion of it to even have that effect. Otherwise, it's gone and quickly removed from our broken down in our body. Very smart scientists throughout the years trying to figure out how do we do this. Big pharma wasn't even interested necessarily right at first. And this VA doctor from the Bronx was doing a project and found that the Gila monsters, these little lizards out in the desert, could go months without eating. So he thought maybe this has something to do with blood sugar. Well, serendipitously found, and it wasn't even related to that, I don't think, but they found that the venom from these Gila monsters, they're venomous. 40% or so of the venom was similar to our own human GLP-1. They refined it down and started, playing around with it, and it didn't get broken down, and it had a blood sugar lowering effect. That was the first GLP-1 ever, a medicine ever created, called exenatide,
Hmm.
and trade name was Byetta. So that was like 2005, 2006. Other smart researchers were like, well, okay, hold on, let's see if we can modify human GLP-1. So yeah, they figured out a way to, it's a whole biochemistry thing. They figured out a way to essentially make that human GLP-1 last longer. So that was the next one that came out, called liraglutide, and that was the trade name Victoza. That was like 2008 or 9. Smarter scientists trying to go, all right, how do we do this? So they found a few more, but now they've gotten it up to a week. You only have to inject it every week. The first one was twice a day. The next
Mhm.
one was once a day, but now they got it like a week long. And the way that the GLP-1 works naturally in our body is it essentially helps our pancreas make more insulin, and it's called glucose dependent, meaning it only releases and helps when our glucose or sugars go higher. It doesn't, if your blood sugar is already low, it's not going to make your blood sugar go lower. Throughout the years, the scientists found out, wow, there's GLP-1 receptors all over the place,
Hmm.
including in the brain, which obviously has an effect in appetite. They saw most diabetes medicines, people gained weight, and especially if they're making more insulin. Well, these people, despite making more insulin, lost weight. So they're like, what is going on here? And they saw this in animals, but they then developed the medicines eventually into weight medicines. And that's kind of how we got here. There's a lot more to it. We can get more into specifics, but now they're getting very refined and better at hitting receptors and all sorts of stuff.
That's actually really cool that, and I mean, this plays the same kind of role that I guess psychology does too, where you're constantly learning from what you have and growing and growing and growing. And I find it funny because I remember when I started my journey on a GLP-1, I had somebody actually say, "Oh, you're injecting lizard venom." And
Yeah,
I'm
of
like, "What the
course.
fuck are you talking about?" Like at that
Yep.
point, I was like, huh?
Yeah.
And it's interesting all of the misconceptions and the misbeliefs. And one of them is that, oh, this hasn't been around very long, but your timeline, to me at least, says otherwise. Or is that not really a long time that we've
Yes.
had?
Over a couple decades now. So, I mean, there are newer versions of them, but the class of medicines have been around for more than 2 decades. So,
Okay,
yeah.
so eat
Pretty
that,
long. I mean,
people.
how long do they want? That's always
Yeah,
what I ask. So like, these haven't been around a long time. Well, how long do you want? How long of
yeah.
a study do you want? How many people do you want in the study? Like, what do you want?
And I mean, when you look at science, science is literally all about falsification. So we're always
Yeah.
trying to grow, we're always trying to
Yeah.
do. So you really don't have a timeline. Okay, yeah, cool. So then, okay, wait, wait. So now I'm going to be nerdy and I'm going to go straight to the food noise because I'm being selfish here. So you were able to even start talking about the brain in that description. And you do talk about food noise on your platform. I've seen a few videos on it. Can you actually explain for the listeners what food noise actually is? So, like the biological, the neurological
Mhm.
part, because I think most people think it just means you're hungry or it's you don't have willpower, if you
Yeah.
will. And obviously, I'm sure that there's a lot more to that.
Yeah, this concept is more pronounced now because of the medicines. People didn't even realize they had it. Like, this is the big thing. So there's hunger, and we all kind of know hunger. You go for a long time without eating, and then you can feel it like in your stomach. You're a little bit irritable from it.
Hmm.
Like we've all been there. You just gone a long time, and you're like used to eating. Like for me, I eat like every what, 4 or 5 hours or something like that, if I'm splitting it up correctly. And if I go to 6, 7, I can feel it in my stomach, and I'm a little bit hangry. Then so that's different. There's cravings where you're thinking about a specific food. So for example, after dinner, you may go, I'd like something salty, crispy, crunchy, starchy, fatty, like a chip or maybe chocolate, whatever. It could be something, but it's very
Cheesecake.
specific. Yeah, specific though. It's like that is the thing you want. Food noise, though, is what people describe, and we've all had it. It just depends on how much of a, I'd call pathological levels of it. It's thinking intrusively, ruminating about food in general, and it's not. It could be healthy food. It could be anything. It's thinking about, is there going to be enough at the meal? Is are the leftovers going to be around tomorrow? Are there anything and everything? What about the workroom? Did they eat all that pizza? And it's not specifically about the pizza. It's just food. You're just thinking about it. Boom, 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 boom. Going out to dinner, you can't even relax because you're thinking about the bread that's coming out. You're thinking about dessert. And again, not specifically any specific craving. It's just boom, 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 thinking about it.
Yeah.
And so it's a different part of the brain that controls like satiety. So it's satiation. Like, so you have your hunger, but then, you have this satiety. It's between meals where you're just kind of, you're not hungry. You're not thinking about much. So, but you can still be full and satiated and still thinking about food in general, but like your stomach doesn't want anymore and your brain doesn't necessarily want anymore, but you're still thinking about it.
Hmm.
And so then this medicine comes out and they people talk about it. And I think this is why it works so well, is because people eat not when they're hungry and not like, I mean, we see it all the time. I'm not hungry, but I'm still eating and I'm still thinking about food. So there are different parts of the brain that hunger, cravings, and thoughts about food are related to. And they're just now trying to tease it out because you have to do these
Hmm.
very it's really hard to do, but you do these special functional brain imaging types of studies. You can do PET scans, you can do functional MRIs, and all sorts of different things. And that's not my field. I'm friends with these people, and they say how hard it is. And there are certain ones that will have been invalidated, so then they have to go back and and restudy it. But like there are there are specific parts of the brain that control that, and these medicines work in the part that make you feel satiated and have satiety in between meals. They work on parts of the brain that help with cravings, and then through downstream effects, because I don't believe they work directly on the parts that are for thinking about food. At least that's the thought right now. There's definitely downstream pathways where it hits further up and then down the stream, down the pathway, it eventually hits that part of the brain. So there's the reward center, and I guarantee you've talked about, at least peripherally talked about this and with ADHD, talking about dopamine. So the mesolimbic part of the brain, the reward pathway, I believe that is the the pathway that this specifically has an effect on. And because we'll talk about addiction and stuff later that we're seeing, but I believe it's all related there.
Yeah, no, and I think, and you're right. Well, we can definitely talk more about that at another point because you're also talking about like what where I fall into the mix. We see it that people are struggling with sexual dysfunctions in the sense of losing their quote desire, and again, that's that reward center, the predictor of reward, and the research is showing even people who seem like they're depressed, but they're not actually depressed because they're not necessarily doing the things that have brought them quote satisfaction like in the past because it's quieting the insight in mind to do it. Am I making sense?
Yeah, no, you're describing what a lot of my patients are seeing. I'm doing a paper on anhedonia induced by tirzepatide and semaglutide as well, but it can get very strong, and so they have this flatness, and some of them actually they go from, and we'll get into this, but like they're now eating sugary, sour type of patch things because they're trying to get a bump or something. I can't
Mm-hmm.
describe it. I'm not a neurobiologist, but they're not even craving it. They're just trying to get stimulation and they're not
Mm-hmm.
getting it.
And I'll tell you this right now, self-disclosure, I always have been the type to go for sour candies to keep me going and get that stimulation going. But since I've been on a GLP-1, I've noticed my need for sour like interactions in my day increase. And I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but as you were just saying, I was like, yeah, no, that's me. That is
Interesting.
me. Yeah. Yeah, because sugar and that it is stimulating and
Yeah.
it's very helpful. And in some capacity, like you get benefits from the GLP-1, but then in some ways, it's now demanding more executive function demand for you to now have to actively be proactive now in the areas that are now more quiet that now you used to overuse, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like exhausting. It's a love-hate relationship. At least that's what I've kind of been able to manage with it. Now, let me ask you, when it comes to the medications themselves, who would you then say qualifies for this? Because I think that's also another thing where people are saying like it should only be this, it should only be
Yeah.
that.
So the spectrum has widened, and in the beginning, obviously, it was just approved for type 2 diabetes. We're using it off label all the time for just weight because you can see the trials. People do extremely well, and even the early trials before it was approved for weight, the trials, the phase 3 trials looked good. So a lot of like Ozempic was used off label. And the first actual weight version was the higher dose of the Victoza, that liraglutide. People were using that because they then dosed it much higher and called it Saxenda. So that one in 2014 was approved for weight, but the cutoffs for BMI were specific. It was what we call anthropometric. It was based off of BMI and size. So instead of um, like, oh, this person I think should qualify. Well, sorry, their BMI is 26, despite them having high blood pressure and other, weight-related issues. Sorry, you don't meet the cutoff. Whereas somebody that has like a 32 BMI and just fit, extremely fit, metabolically healthy, oh, they qualify. And it's like, okay, that doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
So those were the FDA requirements, but recently they've actually removed those from the label. So the way that I prescribe it is I just, if somebody's been uh, doing diet and exercise and all the different behavioral things and just clearly you haven't responded. That's kind of the way you say. You don't say you failed because it's that changes the onus onto the person. We
Yeah.
say they didn't respond to that type of therapy. We then start discussing this if they'd be a candidate. So even patients who have like a lower BMI, let's say even around, it could be 25 even without, they may not have metabolic issues, but maybe they have a family history of things, and it's like they want to prevent those in the future. If they have lower, so when they start getting into 23, 24, you start getting into are they using this for vanity purposes without any clinical improvement? Once they get lower, I would be looking for things like PCOS, anything weight related that I think metabolically could be improved with one of these medicines. We're not looking for a lot of weight loss. The first thing is do no harm. So we're seeing a lot of clinics out there going, oh, I don't care that you have a BMI of 21 or 22 or that your body fat level is low. We'll give it to you so you could fit into whatever, like whatever you're going to an event,
Mm-hmm.
fit into whatever clothing that you're wearing. That could set you up potentially for harm. We can get into why that is, but what we don't want to do is like weight cycling. So when I'm looking at somebody, I'm looking for what I would call like clinical obesity, and it doesn't, people don't like the term, but there's all sorts of different proposed names for what we should call it. But we want to see that there's going to be a benefit for them from a health standpoint. I don't care if the person is looking for aesthetic improvements. I care from my angle whether this is going to be a net benefit versus potential harm. So the spectrum is now very, very gray, and the BMI requirements, the traditional 27. So it used to be 27 plus what's called a comorbidity. So
Hmm.
blood pressure, any of those things I was talking about, or 30 with no comorbidities. But now, that they've removed those. Insurances still may require it. So if your insurance doesn't approve it, it's up to the clinician who's prescribing it to deem whether it's okay or not. But that's how I do it. And I think most obesity doctors, specialists are doing it now that way.
Okay, so I think this goes into the next area of fear mongering, where people have created the narrative then of this drug is dangerous. We don't have those long-term effects, understanding, and it kind of goes back to what we were saying before. But like, is it really the drug that is dangerous? Or is it the lack of education, lack of support, and MDs and individuals prescribing the drug that's the problem? Did I say that
Yeah.
directly
So
enough?
yeah. So okay. So I'll tell you where it could be an issue. So we don't have long-term data on very healthy people who are using it. Well, I don't know if you'd call it recreationally or for very purely aesthetic purposes with no metabolic issues. Having said that, we can probably safely say that the risks are probably similar to what you see in the trial data. There's nothing about somebody that might have type 2 diabetes or obesity or excess body weight that that would make it all of a sudden not as, or that would make it less risky. It's more so that the benefit that you see is is you're not getting as much of a benefit other than aesthetically at those lower weights, if that makes sense. And the other issue is if people are using it like they use crash dieting, you start getting into weight cycling concerns. And whether it's harmful physically or biologically, and that I can't say for sure, but we just don't actually know. And then there's probably psychological concern because if for body dysmorphia and things like that to go like, okay, maybe like we shouldn't weight cycle. Regardless, it's the same thing with dieting though. So
Yeah.
like having somebody with a 20, and you see it, I see other doctors do it, and I'm like, don't prescribe this for someone with a 21 BMI who's clearly like trying to get to like a 19 BMI. Like you start worrying about frailty in those cases. Um, so that is a doctor issue, and I don't think the drugs are necessarily um, harmful in those regards. It's just that the very rare potential harms start outweighing the zero benefit.
Yeah.
Does that
No,
does that
it makes sense. And but I think also what you had just said about weight cycling, that's the other part of this. When I've heard the term chronic obesity, using this drug like blood pressure medicine or any other medicine that we're looking to use long term, would you then say that this drug, if people are using it for aesthetic reasons, is it something that can then actually be used on a short-term basis without reverting back to what the body was doing without the drug
yeah.
versus long-term? Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so they've done trials on this where they put everybody on the drug and then halfway through or so they randomize a portion of those people to a placebo. So everybody still thinks that they're getting the drug the
Uh-huh.
drug. And what you see in that placebo group is they start regaining the weight on average, and the other people continue to lose weight. Well, then you can start splicing and dicing all those people that regain their weight. Like, okay, is everybody regaining the weight? No, it turns out that not everybody regains their weight. There's a very small percentage of people, 10, 15% of people, at least over the course of a year. I don't know what happens over 5 years, that seem to keep most of their weight off, which is kind of interesting. Some people gain, a third of their weight, a half of their weight. Some people regain all of it. It's kind of the spectrum where you start splicing out. But on
Did,
average, yeah.
In that study though, did they show the differences of like what was going on in the person's life, or it was
That's
just
where
we're just comparing
that's
and we
where
didn't look further?
yeah, that's a great question. Everybody asks that, like, okay, what are those people doing differently? My hypothesis is, after seeing however many thousands of patients and seeing is, and I don't take people off the medicine, but some people have to go off due to insurance purposes. They insurance stops paying, they can't keep paying self-pay. So we're
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, let's figure out what to do here. So the reason that people regain their weight, and why people regain their weight after diet and exercise, our bodies are fighting us in the form of appetite. So mathematically, you can see appetite starts increasing every however many kilograms that we lose. It's mathematically, the body fights harder and harder and harder. So, it's fine over a while. You can adjust. You can eat foods that are more uh, lower lower calorie density, higher volume, and do all these other things. But at some point, like, there's only so many big salads you can eat without anything in it. That's kind of goes back to how the brain works with appetite. You can feel full in the belly, but still you're not even satiated. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you've ever eaten a huge salad without anything else, you've felt that way before. So the medicines, though, when you stop, if you've lost a ton of weight and you stop the medicine, all of a sudden your body's going like, oh, wait a second, our special medicine in our brain's not there anymore. All that weight that you lost, now your body's like, boom, fighting back hard. But what
Mm.
about those people that can keep the weight off? Well, that actually is a very similar percentage to the people that lose weight and keep it off without any medicine at all. It's very similar, actually. Around
Interesting.
Yeah, around 10 to 15% of people can lose about 15% or more of their total body weight and keep it off. So, for example, 15%. So, if you're 200 pounds, that's 30 pounds. So, people are like, why not just do diet and exercise? Turns out that very few people can lose a lot of weight and keep it off over the long run. And they think it's like, you're a big pharmaceutical, you just want to sell this medicine. I'm like, I'm just presenting the data of the randomized controlled trials where they do very intensive coaching that you would never even get in the real world in this trial. And this is the best case scenario, and this is what happened to them. So
Yeah.
you can get mad at me. I don't,
I totally
but
hear you here. And I
yeah,
think, but then, going into that though, the idea of even quote diet and exercise and the nutrition conversation of everything, when we talk about these drugs, is it true that you need to be fueling your body with certain types of protein and energy to complement the drug and all that type of conversation?
yeah. So the exact same thing, like if you were to do a your own diet plan without the medicine, it's very similar. It's just that the medicine makes it just superpowers you to be able to actually sustain a lower calorie diet. So again, the other thing is the medicine shouldn't be completely eliminating your appetite. It should be more like, I would say, normalizing your appetite.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, so we still want to get our protein requirements in. There are a lot of people that they're now looking, and this is obvious. If you're eating a low calorie diet and not really paying attention to your diet, people end up with nutrient deficiencies. So I tell everybody, make sure you're taking a multivitamin and mineral supplement. If you want to go get the GLP-1 labeled Centrum or Nature's whatever, fine. I think you'd probably be fine with literally a Flintstones vitamin and mineral, but whatever. Um, yeah, all my patients get their own very own dietitian. I don't mess around, so I'm like, I, they have very few nutrient deficiencies because we're focusing on a variety of diet. But most people aren't going to have that.
You just won brownie points with my sister-in-law, who's a registered dietitian, who
Okay,
screams from the rooftop saying that a dietitian should always be part of this plan. And that's
should
the
be,
other
of
problem because she's getting the patients in the hospitals after taking these drugs with no support in
course.
terms of that. And they're like going down the shitter because of it.
Yeah.
And again, is it the shot or is it that you're not taking care of yourself the way you need to necessarily? And it could just be because you weren't provided the education and the support needed with it.
Yeah, so ideally everybody would have that option. The systems, this goes into me on a soapbox. The system's so terrible
Yeah.
that people wouldn't. And then on top of that, I don't want to blame completely the system because some people just simply don't want to talk to a dietitian.
Yeah.
But at the very least, they should have that ability to do so. And we can't force people to do it. And behavior change, trying to force people, it doesn't necessarily work out
Yeah, fair.
well.
And you have Crocs even in the field. So it's
Oh
the other
God.
layer of exhaustion of finding somebody, but then are you really getting the support and the person having the needed
Yeah.
education to support you?
Yeah, that's like literally the meme with Ben Affleck smoking a cigarette outside, just looking exhausted. That's me
Yeah.
every day.
So wait, exactly. I feel you. I truly do. But on the other side of the mental health realm. So wait, with the malnutrition then, okay? Because this is the other thing that people say, and I'm sure you've had to say this several times. The losing muscle mass. Like
Yeah,
again, is this the drug? Is this the weight loss? Is it a
yeah.
combination of both? What are we doing here?
Probably my favorite topic because I'm doing research into this specifically. There's a concern for it. We don't think the medicines specifically target the muscle and eat away at it.
Mm-hmm.
You eat fewer calories than you burn. You generally lose a combination of adipose tissue, fat tissue, and other lean fat-free mass tissue, organs, potentially bone, and that sort of thing. The one thing that we know that prevents it the best right now is resistance training. So I'm a shill. That's my podcast, Docs Who Lift. I have a program for all my patients called Lift RX. I'm very like I push it hard without like making people do it. I just, again, like the dietitians, I want it available for them. But there's nothing about the medicine that specifically targets and eats away at muscle. It's just that we have now this very effective drug that makes it to where you're not eating as much anymore. So protein is a part of that too. So getting I would say sufficient, you could say optimal, but sufficient amount. It's not even really that much, somewhere around a gram per kilogram of body weight or so. It could be 1.2. It doesn't really matter. Like if you're in that range, you're going to be better. Like you're going to be better than if you were way below that range. It's really the resistance training though. So what we're seeing, we published a case series and we're doing a cohort study right now. We have patients that gained muscle and even bone, it looks like, while taking these medicines, despite losing a ton of weight because they were just like machines. Like they work out more than I do, it seems like anyway. I follow some of my patients on Instagram and I'm like, Jesus, I'm kind of jealous at how much they're able to exercise. And they're just like, wow. And they turned in, they're like athletes. Like,
Uh-huh.
holy cow, it's amazing to see. But then some people, I can't force them to lift weights, can't force them to eat more protein. And yeah, they lose. It's not so much more that it looks like it just looks like they dieted a lot without doing those things. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the gist, is that it doesn't. I don't like to fear monger it because I don't want people to be afraid of the medicine. I want people to know what's optimal and best for them. I don't know if people might say that fear might work better. I try to go the other way though.
Yeah, no, I try to go the other way. Psychology definitely has disproved fear is not any beneficial to our mental
That's
health
my
and motivation long term. But it's interesting too, because when you talk about the real possibility of people losing the muscle mass, is it kind of like neurogenesis where you can grow it back if you've lost it?
Yeah, yeah, you can. If you've never lifted weights before, that's like where you see the most gain. So I always tell people the best time to start is now. You can't do it. You like if you haven't done it, okay, let's start now. It's never too late. You
Okay.
can always build it. Um, yeah, that's the gist.
Okay. Now, my next thing is that if it can be something that you can regain, even if you lost it, I know you keep saying strength training or lifting weights. Like I do Pilates. Would that be something that's considered resistant training, or is that like meh?
There's a component there. What I would say, it's is it optimal? It's not optimal, but it's if that like what I always tell my patients, whatever you're gonna do, like we got to just get you to move and be physically
Mm-hmm.
active. If like if you would be so against resistance training. I said, "Don't you do Pilates? You better go in there and start lifting weights." And you're like, I mean, you're a behavioral specialist. Like, I don't need to preach to the
I'm
choir,
gonna
but
say, fuck you, I'm not
yeah,
doing it.
exactly. There you go. So I don't want to preach to the choir because you're much better at behavior change and all this stuff than I am. But that's the gist. You got it. So, but I would say that physical activity in general is better than none. Optimally, it could be resistance bands, machines, whatever. It could be a class, it could be circuit training. But like if you're gonna do Pilates, there's different. I'm not a Pilates expert, but there's different Pilates where you're doing some resistance while you're doing the movement. So like that is better than doing nothing. So that will have an effect as well.
Okay. Now, wait, can we go back to the bone density piece? Because I don't know if
Yeah.
I completely zoned out if you said it.
Yeah.
But that's also another thing I hear people saying again. So with bone density, I think of it as a woman, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of the medication, my estrogen and all of those things that are also linked to bone and things, from my understanding, is also going to vary as I age. So I should be proactive regardless. But how does the medication affect this concept of bone density and the loss? And can that be regained, if you
So it's
will?
it's harder to regain bone mineral density losses. It's bone mineral density doesn't change as quickly as muscle. Now, having said that, it's the same as if you were to diet. Without you lose weight, bone mineral density goes down. We see it in every study. They look at bariatric surgery. They look at all these different things. Resistance training, studies have been done, looks like it minimizes the bone mineral density losses that occur. Now, where would this be a concern? The concern would be in a postmenopausal patient who already has a pretty low bone mineral density, and they like this goes back to the question of like, am I going to do more harm in this person?
Mm,
Let's say they're a 24 BMI lady, postmenopausal, 64 years old, and their bone mineral density, they're already maybe they already have osteoporosis, and they want to lose some more weight despite being like metabolically healthy and already like relatively thin. Um, they're not going to gain any appreciable amount of physical function by losing weight. It's literally for aesthetic reasons. That is a terrible patient to give this medicine to. I would not do that. I would be like risking my license, I would say, because you're setting that person up for a potential uh, for worsened frailty. You don't want them to lose the muscle, especially if they're let's say that the resistance training and even still, it's a terrible. I'm like, this is a terrible patient. The more I think about it, like, this is a terrible patient. I
I
like
love
can't
how your
justify.
brain is stroking
I'm
out right
I'm
now.
trying I'm trying to justify it in some no, I can't even justify it. I have not well, I say I have a patient I have some patients that have gotten down to like a 21 BMI. They weren't my patient. I wouldn't have let them get down this low. They're postmenopausal. They've lost like half of their weight. They were like 300 pounds or something like that. Now they're down to like 150 and they are in that osteoporosis range. I just basically, and they come to me like help optimize me. I'm like, you're not losing any more weight. I just want you to know, even though if they want to get down to like a 20. I'm like, that is bad. So I won't let them necessarily regain weight, but I'll try to optimize them with resistance training there. But if you're taking somebody that's starting in that range, terrible. So that yeah, that would be a concern. Now, juxtapose that to someone who's let's say they're a 35 BMI and they have high blood pressure, but they have osteopenia. They're postmenopausal. Great candidate. You would monitor the bone mineral density per usual, but like this is where that whole idea of benefits and risk, where if the risks are so much overweighing this small aesthetic benefit, that's like I would say that's nearing medical negligence. If
Yeah. And then my thing is that I'm sure people who are not then getting approved by doctors, they do have access to buy these over
yeah,
the counter,
yeah.
or how does
So yeah, so you can get them on the gray market right now. That is
gray
like,
market? What the fuck is the gray
well,
market?
it's the gray. Oh yeah. So I hate to even mention it, but people know about this. You can get the drugs that are going to be coming out in the future. You can get them right now because there's a chemist out in China that will develop it and sell it, and you can get it over here for pennies on the dollar
Like
compared
the
to the
Canal Street version of designer bags.
yeah, yeah. So, and the scary thing is that there's millions of people on them here because they're
Mm,
super cheap. I will say that the government's cracking down, and I will say that it's very risky because you cannot confirm what's in it. You would have to personally test these every single time.
wow.
But people are doing it. You can get all sorts of uh, all sorts of the drugs that are coming out on the market in years away right now. And I say that, please don't do it, whoever's listening
Yeah,
to
don't
this,
do it. Don't do it.
but like people are doing that right now. So yeah, you can totally go get it. They're cracking down. There's gonna be some big time stuff coming down. But for the past few years, people could get it, and they call it gray market because it's technically legal because they call it they're supposed to
Oh,
be for
yeah.
research purposes only. So you're supposed to give it to a rat and whatever, but people are just injecting it and
They're
um,
cosplaying. They're dressing up as rats.
yeah, yeah, that yeah. I'm not going to kink shame anybody.
You went right into my trap. No pun intended. Um, so okay, that makes total sense to me. I also like hearing that you're not one of these doctors that are looking to just give people what they want without looking and outweighing the pros and the cons and where you're going long term. But again, we know that that's not everybody. I wish it was. So what would then, I don't know if this is a question that you can answer, or maybe you've already answered it, but then what the fuck is responsible prescribing looking like?
Yeah, there's some, I mean, there is some gray area here because someone that I might feel comfortable with, there are going to be a lot of doctors that are not comfortable with. I think, I'm obviously biased. I think I have a very strong grasp on who would be best for this. So again, it comes down to the benefits and risks, and there's a shared decision-making process. So for example, let's go to the most extreme examples of when I've prescribed this, and somewhere around the 23 to 24 BMI. And again, I don't like the BMI, but it's a decent proxy in people that aren't necessarily athletic. It has a decent proxy to there because then you can do what's called like a waist circumference, and you can even do DEXA scans and these other things because it could be that 23 or 24 BMI actually stores a lot of body fat in their abdomen area. So
Mm.
people have heard about the visceral fat. But yeah, people can have very thin like
Mm.
extremities, and they can actually have kind of metabolic abnormalities because they store most of their fat viscerally or and ectopically. And actually, certain ethnicities like South Asians actually have lower BMI thresholds for when you start thinking about if they have obesity. So, for example, if it's a 20, I'm going to say 23. I don't know if it may be a 23 and a half BMI, but their waist circumference was on the higher side. Their blood pressures and blood sugars, there's clear insulin resistance, some PCOS there. Like, from a BMI standpoint, they don't fit the criteria, but that person has what I would call excess adipose tissue, excess adiposity, fat tissue that's causing them harm. And despite them doing all the lifestyle factors, that person likely, again, we don't have the studies that go down that far necessarily, but that person likely will have a benefit from using this medicine and losing somewhere around 5 to 10% of their weight, especially if it's mostly in that visceral fat area. But there has to be a discussion of, are you going to take this long term? Because I can't promise you that if you come off of it in 6 months that you're going to keep all that weight off. And then we get into the whole weight cycling thing. So there's always this discussion, whereas other people would go look at that person and go, nope, you don't fit the criteria, the kind of the black and white criteria that people put
Mhm.
out there. The other thing is people that have done diet and exercise and have lost a significant amount of weight. So there are those people out there. They've lost, let's say, a person, I have some patients that were like 300 or so pounds who've now gotten down to like, whatever, 160 pounds. And their BMI is somewhere around 24.
Mm.
And they're relatively, and they can be relatively lean, but their appetite's getting higher and higher throughout the years, and they're starting to gain a few pounds every month or so. Doctors will be out there and say, nope, you got to wait till your BMI is 30 So they have to gain another however many 20, 30, 40 pounds to qualify. My line of thinking is this person clearly has a history of obesity and they're clearly on their way back to it. Why don't we just prevent that from happening? So that patient, I would say, is a good candidate. Other doctors who are much more conservative would say no. So those are the nuances that I would have with my patients.
Fair. Now, I think my head goes to like what is then considered a healthy weight loss timeline? Because that's like the other thing that I keep hearing, what you should be versus what's healthy. Um, and my head is jumping to something, and I'm just gonna say it. So like you see a bunch of people losing weight, and they're talking about like Ozempic face, and the other term is like Ozempic vulva, like where you've got like
Oh
a
yeah.
floppy vulva now, and the skin and all of that. This is where my head's fucking going. I am so sorry, but like when we think of weight loss, is there a time like what is this, and is there a way to reverse that floppy skin thing that's going on? And am I making sense?
Yeah, no, you're making
Full
sense. So
circle.
the usual rate of weight loss we look for somewhere around a half of your percent of total body weight per week, up to about a percent. So if you're 200 pounds, that's 1 to 2 pounds. If you're 300 pounds, it's 1.5 to 3 pounds. If you're 400 pounds, 2 to 4 pounds a week. A little bit more can be, it's fine, but like the faster you go, the more risk of gallstones and maybe muscle loss a little bit there as well. Unfortunately, if you have a lot of weight to lose, and even if you're following those guidelines, you're going to be at risk for a lot of excess skin.
Mm.
And there's literally nothing. People, you get these charlatans online, take my vitamin C special formula. Make sure you have enough vitamin C and you're getting enough collagen, whatever, that might help with skin appearance a little teensy, teensy, teensy bit, but like nothing will tighten that up. We try to make sure people lift weights to fill back that skin to form their body, but that's not necessarily going to do it. So the unfortunate reality is that a lot of people, if they lose a ton of weight, again, I can't say exactly on each person how much it would be, that they might require surgery if they need to get rid of that excess skin. I
Okay.
hate that answer, but it's like I don't have another
Well,
answer.
I think it's an important answer because I think people get stuck in this idea of like if I lift a certain amount of weights and I do it this way, and then people start getting like really overwhelmed by all of the different things. And you know, I know weight loss, weight, oh my gosh, strength training is definitely helpful for
Yeah.
tightening everything as you go. But like you just said, if somebody has a decent amount of weight that needs to be lost, you're really going to probably struggle to not have that loose skin regardless of what you're doing. Would I
Yeah.
be correct in that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So now I'm jumping to a completely different topic because I know you're already with me for the time that we have. Can we talk a little bit about PCOS?
Yeah. Sure.
Um, I guess what's the connection between PCOS, the insulin resistance, and the whole weight, and the why is it so often then misunderstood, mishandled clinically? Because I know there's a lot of discourse online about PCOS and all this insulin resistant narrative.
Yeah. So the connection between, you got your brain, the hypothalamus, pituitary, that then talks to your ovaries. And with PCOS, people are like, oh, if you gain weight, it causes PCOS. If you lose weight, it fixes your PCOS. Well, there's probably a very strong environmental and genetic factor in there, because just because you gain weight doesn't mean you all of a sudden have PCOS and vice versa. You don't just,
Yeah.
there are other factors there. And not everybody with PCOS necessarily has a ton of insulin resistance, but the insulin resistance will, in fact, increase a lot of the issues that you see in the androgen productions that you see. And so there are a lot of people with PCOS also that feel like they struggle. This was like the big thing the other day. They struggle losing weight. And what I was saying was, well, with insulin resistance and the inflammatory things that are going on with PCOS, the brain is a strong target for the inflammation that then increases appetite. And so it just feels like you feel miserable trying to lose weight. So then the medicines work. People are like, well, it's clearly the medicines work via insulin sensitivity, and that's how you lose weight. Well, no, the GLP-1 by itself doesn't actually have a strong insulin sensitizing effect. Tirzepatide, though, the GIP does have a little bit of an insulin sensitizing effect, which may be why you see better responses for blood sugar regulation. But essentially, the medicines fix that dysregulated appetite that you see.
Mm.
Um, and so all of a sudden, the miserable feeling that you felt when trying to lose weight before is gone. And people will swear up and down that they're like, I'm eating more now, I swear. I can only explain that like they've done these rigorous studies and shown that like, no, it subconsciously we eat a lot less than what we did before when taking these medicines. And they've looked at why, they've looked at metabolic rate. Metabolic rate doesn't increase. That means like revving us up a little bit. Nope,
Mm.
that's the new one. That's the retatrutide that's coming out. It has another component that may increase it a little bit, not a ton, but enough to make a difference. But the appetite effects are very strong. So with PCOS, so if you fix the appetite component, people lose weight. Now that will have an effect on all the other things that are going on with PCOS. Your ovulation, the androgens will
Mhm.
should decrease, so you get improved acne. But these GLP-1 medicines, the GLP-1 receptors all over the body. And it's not just an insulin sensitivity thing. There's something about, like I have patients that have PCOS. They don't lose weight in the first few weeks and they get their period back. So I believe, and they're doing these studies now and they're looking at
Interesting.
this, there are receptors on the ovaries, there are receptors everywhere, including in the brain in multiple places, likely related to the communication between the hypothalamus pituitary and your ovaries. Because all of a sudden, if people start ovulating, now it's either that, the thought is, or maybe people all of a sudden start eating a lot less, and then that improves it, and they don't lose weight. Well, no, they should. If you're eating a lot less over the course of a few weeks, you should notice some weight loss. But people start getting their periods back very quickly, despite no weight loss, despite they feel like they had no appetite suppression or any changes. So I believe, and again, these studies will come out, believe there's something specific about the medicine having an effect there. So that's kind of the gist with the PCOS and these medicines. I don't think it's all just the weight loss for the metabolic improvements in ovulation that you see. I think that plays a large role, but there's something about the medicines that are helping
That's
otherwise.
like really freaking interesting, actually, because I know that people also have talked about how like their menstrual cycle gets wonky when
Yeah.
taking quote GLP-1s, but I
Yep.
always assumed it was just like weight loss related in general because we see that just without a GLP-1 and a weight loss. But
Yeah.
but seeing that their period is coming back and
It.
knowing that there's GLP-1s everywhere in your body, like this is something I didn't even know. Like
Yeah.
I didn't know the extent of this. And so then I think about my own experience. Okay, so self-disclosure, I've clearly said it. I'm been on a GLP-1. I'm going on 2 years. Within that 2 year frame, I have lost 84 pounds.
Wow.
I do Pilates. I used to do strength training, but honestly, I just don't have the time and the mental capacity. I'm on Adderall, so I already struggle to remember to eat on top of everything else. So I'm like a protein shake kind of gal. I do the Fairlife. I hope that's the good one. You
Yeah,
know,
I love Fairlife.
it's like a Wendy's Frosty. It tastes so yummy. Anyway, but I've also noticed while being on the GLP-1, my ADHD symptoms have actually been a bit better.
Yeah.
Um, and again,
I hear that all the time.
I don't know if it's also because of just the weight, like weight loss and more energy
I
giving
don't think
because
so.
like
I think it's the brain. I really do. The effects on the reward pathway, there
yeah.
has to be. I'll bet the farm. I would
Yeah.
bet the farm. I hear it from all sorts of patients.
But it also, I will say, for me, self disclosure, I've noticed my access to desire for sex is even harder though.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so that also, now I have another layer. I'm also perimenopausal. So I have that extra layer, but I have noticed since starting it differences. And again, I can't say, is it because of it or is it because of perimenopause? It could be a
Right.
variety of things, but if you're also seeing similarities too, it is very interesting. I mean, we need more research for sure. And like from your
Yeah.
standpoint, and I don't know if you ever screened for this, so I don't know if you'll know this, but I do know that PCOS is linked to in terms of relationship with ADHD. Do you notice a lot of women coming through your practice that are having both and, is one being missed and then treated and not the other? Am I making sense with that question? Oh
Yeah,
my God.
tons. Tons. I'll have patients that were ADHD and then come on the medicine, and then people that are doing this and then find out that they're ADHD. I have a very high prevalence of the two in my practice.
Okay. So do you then see a lot of women who have ADHD also experiencing like histories of eating disorders? Because I know the research also shows a lot of
Oh yeah,
relationships there. Yeah.
tons of, especially binge eating disorder.
Yeah.
Yes.
Me.
You're like, raise your hand.
Yeah, raise your hand.
Guilty.
I gotta be honest, the GLP-1 saved my fucking life.
Yeah.
Like I'll never forget it. I was in a car, I went to Whole Foods and I bought a pistachio fucking cookie and it was literally like my first week being on it. And I took a bite of it and I put it down.
Yeah, it's
I started
amazing.
fucking crying. I was like, oh my God, I've never been able to do this. And it really helped me learn skills and be able to have it get on the fucking stage that I couldn't gain access to. Like, it saved my life. I don't care what anyone says. And I try to stick with the science as much as I can. Everyone has to do what works for them. But like, I get the concern, but uh, it saved my life
I love it. I love to
on
hear
so
it.
many levels. Now, as while it saved my life, I do know, and I just wanted to ask you, there is that concern about like suicidal ideations
Yeah.
and high risk. And I don't know like what the FDA has to say about it. I recently have been seeing a lot more videos. I don't know if the algorithm is algorithming lately, but can you just talk on that a little bit? Because I know that that's a concern as well for people.
Yeah, the gist is that they came and found no link so far. What I will say though, I do see a lot of anhedonia at high doses, so people feel flat. I saw, and it
Okay.
wasn't my patient, but I had a database and looking at, it looked like one patient had some suicidal kind of thoughts. It seemed like it was related to the medicine for this patient, but like when they do these placebo-blinded trials, it looks similar. But now with millions and millions of people on it, maybe eventually they'd find a signal, but they've done that and they're like, it doesn't, we can't see it compared to other drugs, doesn't look to be any different. But I will say that I do see mood changes, anhedonia, flatness. That's what I see. Not
Okay.
super common, but like enough to where I'm like, I'm writing a paper. I have a case series coming out on it soon where I'm like, clearly, and it's related to that sexual desire, motivation, and then eating more sugar eventually. So
Yeah.
there's a component there.
That's interesting. And in some capacity, is it then really depression or is it people leaning into depression because of withdrawal and not knowing where the withdrawal is coming from? And then that could increase something more. I'm
I
shooting the shit here.
Yeah, I think it's different the way they describe it. It's different,
Okay.
and it's just a complete lack of because I lower the dose and all of a sudden, boom, they're back to getting outside and it was I don't know. It's a weird thing.
That's so
Yeah,
interesting.
they
So
describe it
lowering the
differently.
dose helps that, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
then tweaking and finding the happy medium. Okay.
Yep.
Now, I'm jumping. My brain's going everywhere because I'm thinking about now PMDD, and I know a lot of people and women who have PMDD struggle
Yep.
with the mood. Do you know much about this? Is this even a question I can
Yeah, I
be
have. I mean,
asking you?
I have patients with it. Again, I haven't seen that the medicine necessarily. Some patients say it helps. Some people say it didn't help with it. And there are a lot of different phases. Like I had a lot of perimenopausal. Is it perimenopause? Is it PMDD? Is it the s- it's really hard to say. I can't say that the medicine helps with it necessarily or worsens it. I do get anecdotally both ways.
Fair. Okay. So it's again, it's just treating your symptoms and trying to
Yeah.
find a happy medium of everything that's involved. Okay. So where do you see all this shit going? I don't know if that's too broad of a question, but like,
And no, the gist is that they're going to try to hit different receptors. I think most people are going to be on one of these medicines in the long-term future because we're going to see it as just something that's going to make quality of life better and extend life, that type of thing. I don't know if it's going to extend life necessarily, but could prevent obesity. It's going to get wild. We're just at the tip of the iceberg. That's what I'll say.
So, with everything that you've described today, and we've gone through so many different variables, like for anyone listening and maybe interested, sitting on the fence with everything there, what would you say? What would you say to their family? How do you prepare them? How do you support them in discovering and finding the
Yeah.
right path here?
I would say, look, if you've struggled losing and gaining the same 20, 30, 40, 50 or more pounds over the course of your life, you've been struggling for thinking about food, talk to your doctor. If your doctor is not very supportive, there are many doctors out here. I'd love you to have come to my online clinic, but like it doesn't have to be us. Definitely have a discussion though, and start talking to friends and family who have taken the medicine and see what their experience is.
And where can people find you? I know I'll put a lot of stuff in the
Yeah.
description, but specifically where?
So on Instagram, I'm at Dr. Nadolsky, DrNadolsky. My clinic is joinvineyard.com. My podcast is Docs Who Lift podcast. So that's where you can find me.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking time to answer all of my questions and helping my listeners. I truly appreciate your time. You are amazing. Keep fighting the good fight. And thank you again.
You got it. Thank you.
Thanks for hanging out with me on ADHD Realities. Hit that subscribe button and share it with a friend who gets it. And always remember, your brain isn't the enemy. Work with it and not against it. Until next time, everyone, be well.